This morning I'd like to do something called learning how to think like Jesus did. Except we won't be able to read minds. We can't do that. But the greatest teacher of all time was Jesus Christ, and that's where I modeled my teaching methods, right from the Bible, not from the world. So we're going to do a little thing called critical thinking skills and tactics. I had to put the tactics, kind of a Marine Corps thing there. Thank you. I like that. So let's make sure we don't get deceived. A great way to not get deceived is learning how to ask good questions. And in Mark 11, verses 29 and 30, it states this. But Jesus said to them, now notice how he does this. He's just been challenged with a question. I will ask you one question, and you answer me. And then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Answer me. So he answered a question with a question. What a powerful technique that is. Too often, we as Christians get too fast to give our answers. Learn to stop and think, because once you put your answers out there, you're accountable for defending them. Make the other person accountable for what they believe and just said before you answer. In the book of Romans, Paul asked over 50 questions, a lot of them rhetorical, for good teaching technique. So in the Bible, we see Jesus and Paul and others use questioning techniques before they give an answer. So we're going to do the same thing. So critical thinking questions. 3 critical thinking questions. When you're challenged with something, whether it's a PhD biologist, a physicist, or a chemist, or whatever area of science or theology, first question you want to ask is, has it ever been observed? That's not too hard, is it? You don't have to be a scientist to remember that. I'm going to hold you accountable for these 2. At the end of this lecture, you will have to know all 3. Or as a Marine thing, you can do push-ups. I have a great teaching technique called fear and intimidation. Works very well. So has it ever been observed? Are you making any assumptions? Number 2, are you making any assumptions? And number 3, how do you know it's true then? Has it ever been observed? Are you making any assumptions? And how do you know it is true? Let me read a quote to you, and you'll memorize it as I read it. We're going to use the 3 critical thinking questions. Here's what a biology textbook had to state. Scientists do know, notice what they're saying, very positive, they do know that about 200 to 300 million years after Earth cooled enough to carry liquid water, cells similar to modern bacteria were common. Okay, question number 1. Has that ever been observed? We're talking 200 to 300 million years ago, aren't we? Okay. Are they making any assumptions then? It's never been observed. We can't do it in the lab. So how do they know it's true? Seems that easy. The only reason they know it's true because they've ruled out a creator God, and the only alternative is evolutionism. I call it an ism because that's exactly what it is. Here's another one. Life ultimately is a material process that arose from non-living material systems spontaneously, at least once in the remote past. Has that ever been observed? No, we can't do it in a laboratory. It wasn't observed. Are they making any assumptions? Yes. Now, how do they know it's true? Because they want to believe in evolution, not a creator God. That's what evolution is about. See, we don't have to know all the ins and outs of biology and chemistry. Learn to ask good questions. Think like Jesus did. Everybody remember the 3 questions now. Has it ever been observed? Make any assumptions? How do you know it's true? Now, how about a power question? Wow. You've advanced to a power question already. And here's your power question. Show me any observational evidence for evolution that does not require me to use faith. Now, what am I demanding here? Observational evidence. I don't want to have to use faith to believe what you're believing there. Has anybody ever observed any evolution taking place? Not amoeba to man, not stars. No one's ever observed any real evolution. No one's observed an ape-like creature evolving to a human being. We've never observed that. So what they're basically asking us to do is accept their so-called faith by faith. See, they don't think they have faith, but they have to. Once you challenge them, they don't have answers. Let me give you an example here. Let's go to outer space. I've heard this on the news the last several years over and over again. Life must be on other planets. It's arrogant to believe we are the only intelligent life in this universe. The power question. Show me any observational evidence for life anywhere else in this universe that does not require me to use faith. Can they do that? No. They can't even show us intelligent life in Washington, D.C. Sorry. So has that ever been observed? Make any assumptions? How do you know it's true? Show me any. See, you only have to remember two words in the power question. Demand observational evidence, not by faith. That's all you have to remember that, and then you can wrap your own words around. This is thinking like Jesus did. When you're challenged, challenge them back with a question. Now let's go to biology. Anybody like biology here? Got a few of you. Darwin's finches, famous bird. They had a drought on one of these islands. The finches got isolated, and because of the food that was there available to them, their beak sizes changed a little bit. They call that evolution. Here's your question. What did we start with? Finches. What did we end with? Finches. We didn't see one giraffe, one elephant, or anything else. They all stayed finches. And this is one of their famous texts. Incidentally, when the drought was over, guess what? They all went back to the same size beaks. Had nothing to do with evolution. Then there was a famous experiment called the pepper moss. These light and dark colored pepper moss like to land on these trees, supposedly, and then the birds like to eat these moss. But before the Industrial Revolution, the bark on the trees were quite light. So the light ones blended in with the trees. Guess which ones the birds saw first? The dark ones. So they ate up most of the dark ones. Then comes the Industrial Revolution, all the chemicals and gets in the atmosphere, and the bark turns a little bit darker shade. Now they see the light ones better because they stand out on the dark bark. And they're starting to eat the light ones, so we have a shift in population there. And they called that evolution. Question is, what did we start with? Moss. What did we end with? It's pretty easy, isn't it? Wow. Even old people can do this one, which I am. Then there's the big one they use, say, bacteria resistance. We put our antibiotics in there, antibiotics into someone, and the bacteria just turn around and smile at us, and they don't die. And they say, that is evolution happening right in our own time. They're evolving in resistance. Well, we can get into all the technical aspects of what's really happening, and it's not what they say. But what did we start with? Bacteria. What did we end with? Bacteria. This is really easy, isn't it? I like easy things. Has it ever been observed? Are you making any assumptions? How do you know it's true? Show me any observational evidence for evolution that does not require me to use any faith. And then what did we start with? What did we end with? Now, how many speak English here? How many remember your English classes? Or you put those into the nightmare category? I want to go through something that you probably didn't learn in the English language. It's called fuzzy words and magic words. Wow. You should have learned these in an English class. Let me give you an idea of what fuzzy words are. I'm going to go through these rapidly. Then we're going to go through a couple examples. We believe, we think, must have, could have, might have. Our opinion is we guess over millions of years. Okay? We believe, we think, we must have, could have, might have. Our opinion is we guess over millions of years. What's common to all of these? When these words are used, what they basically mean is they do not have the observable evidence. Now, it's okay to use these words, but you have to understand what they mean. They do not have the observable evidence. It's just, we believe, or we think it must have happened. Over millions of years, anytime you see that or hear that over millions of years, what it means is they don't have the evidence, just give it enough time. Folks, that is not science. That's faith. I'm going to read an example here, and you'll memorize it as I go through. Because you look pretty sharp this morning. Okay. Paleontologists, anybody know who those people are? They like to hunt for bones and things like that. Paleontologists, get these words, think that this creature called Archaeopteryx, and that was one of the creatures that dinosaurs evolved into. Can you imagine they tell us and they expect us to believe dinosaurs evolved into birds? You know how they get us to believe that? They make up pictures in textbooks. That's what they're doing. Paleontologists think that Archaeopteryx and today's birds descended from some kind of reptile, possibly from a dinosaur. Well, the first words in there, think that. What does that tell you? They don't have the observable evidence. They really don't know. And then it descended from some kind of reptile. They don't even know what kind of reptile it descended from. Then here's your scientific term. Possibly from a dinosaur. What do they know? Nothing. It's all just made up information. This is what they're selling our children in schools. And this is how they're capturing our children into not accepting the Bible, but believing in evolutionism. I'm going to go through another one here. This is from Joseph Silk. He's an astronomer. And he wrote a book called The Big Bang. Very good astronomer. He just happens to believe in evolution, though. I'm going to read this whole thing to you, and I want you to point out the first fuzzy word. That's your job. I'm going to read the whole paragraph, then you pick out the first fuzzy word. Imagine that infinitesimal fluctuations in density were present in the early universe. The expansion of the universe must have exerted a stabilizing influence on such irregularities. The expanding universe has the effect of greatly impeding what otherwise might have been catastrophic forces. Nevertheless, the process of growth, fluctuations went on for a very, very long time. Anybody get the first fuzzy word? Imagine. What's the whole paragraph? We don't really have to go any further, do we? See, this is not hard at all. This is what you see in newspapers a lot, too. So imagine then we had words like must have, might have been, went on for a very long time. Just full of fuzziness. So this side over here, at the threat of doing 10 push-ups apiece, what are the 3 critical thinking questions? Has everyone observed? Make any assumptions? How do you know it's true? Very good. Doesn't fear work well? Wait till this side gets theirs. Okay, let's try a couple of magic words now. That's fuzzy words. Let's go to magic words. Here's a list of magic words I have. Appeared, emerged, arose, gave rise to, was on the way to becoming, burst onto the scene, evolved itself, was making a transition to. It basically says, we don't know how it happened, but just trust us. It happened. Okay, let me read a quote. This was from that magazine or newspaper called USA Today. Has nothing to do with Christianity. Here's what they said in the USA Today. Evo-Devo, meaning evolutionary development, proposes that genes involved in cobbling together flesh and bone during early growth were repurposed to develop new structures throughout the evolution's history. The magic word there is repurposed. Can I give you this is Sunday school, isn't it? So I'm going to give you a homework assignment. And he smiles at that one. You have a homework assignment. Tonight, when you go home, I want you to repurpose yourself into another kind of creature. How do you do that? It's just magic. They just glossed over it, saying all these new features came about just by repurposing themselves. Folks, you can sit there and think all you want, you will not become another creature. It's not scientifically possible. You're starting to see how much evolution goes against science. They're just asking us to believe. Let me give you another magic one. Around 230 million years ago, what does that tell you? They don't have the evidence. During the Triassic period, a new type of reptile emerged on the scene. Did they tell us what kind it was? They didn't say anything. Just a new kind of reptile emerged onto the scene. How did that happen? Well, their answer was just give it enough time and we can have all kinds of new creatures. Folks, that is not science. That's wishful thinking, faith. Now I'm going to another kind of word. We've had fuzzy words, magic words. Don't you wish you learned this in your English class? How about red flag words? Ooh, red flag words. Let me give you some of these. I'm going to break them up into groups. Red flag words. All, everybody, no real scientist. I've had all those used against me in discussions and debates. And I'll give you some examples of these in just a moment. All, everybody, no real scientist. Those express an absolute. If I were to say all scientists, what would you say? Well, have you observed and talked to all scientists? No, then how do you know? How can you use the word all if you haven't talked to them all? There's another category of 3 words: I believe, I think, and truth. Those express a personal idea, those 3. Then there's the last ones. I like these. Fundamentalist and intolerant. Those are a reference to being closed-minded. You fundamentalist, intolerant Christians. Are we fundamentalists? Absolutely we are. We're fundamental about our God, aren't we? And His Word. So fundamentalists, they use it as a derogatory term, but I just say thank you. And you know what? They're fundamental about what they believe too. Intolerant? Well, we need to be a little bit more intolerant today because the church has gotten too tolerant to accepting too many ideas. That's been a problem, is tolerance within the church. Much too much. Tolerance of gay rights. Tolerance of critical race theory. Tolerance of social justice. Folks, we do not tolerate sin. So there is a level of intolerance we have. Let me give you some of these red flag statements. There are no absolutes. What's wrong with that statement? It's an absolute statement itself. It defeats itself. That's what's called relativism. Nobody can live that way. Or how about this one? People should decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. Well, okay, then I just decided that what you just said is wrong. So why should I believe you? See, it's a self-defeating statement again. No one has the whole truth. Well, it'd be better to say this: no one has the whole truth, including myself, which means my statement may not be true. These are all statements that are being used against our youth in the school systems. And if we can't do it, how are our children going to survive? That's true for you, but not for me. That's another statement. Or all real scientists believe in evolution. Well, if you talk to all real scientists, and by the way, what do you mean by real scientist? Well, it's only the scientists that believe like them. Because you know there are thousands of scientists today that do not believe in evolutionism. And why are Christians so intolerant? Well, why are you so intolerant of my alleged intolerance? See, all of these have answers, and junior hires can understand all these. We can start training our junior hires how to respond to these kind of statements. Now, critical thinking. I want to give you an example of deception and critical thinking. I'm going to go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Back to the Garden of Eden. The serpent deceived Eve and Adam. Now, when you analyze what Satan did back then, it goes through 6 steps. Now, I'm going to show you the same tactics Satan used in the Garden of Eden to deceive Adam and Eve are the same tactics he's using on you today. And many of us are falling for them. Number 1, start with an agenda. What was Satan's agenda? Deceive and destroy. He's also got a lot of other characteristics. He's a liar, deceiver, murderer, slanderer. But there he deceived, and his purpose was to destroy everything God made that was good. Next step, step 2, he questioned truth. He planted doubt in Eve's mind. He planted doubt. Step 3, he gave a half-truth. He misrepresented the truth. In other words, he added to what God had told him. Misrepresented truth. And the first 3 steps set it up for step number 4, which is a big one. Complete contradiction of truth. That was step 4 that Satan used. Then step 5, he's got everything set up. Now he shifts the focus. It's not a matter of eating from the tree. It's why did God do that? He shifts the whole focus now to blame God. God is jealous. He doesn't want anybody to be like him, because you can be like God's too. And then step 6, he creates a new truth. Those are the 6 steps. Start with an agenda. It always does that. Question truth, misrepresent truth, shift the focus, then create a new truth. Those are the 6 steps that Satan used. Can I tell you how he sold evolution to the public now? Did the same principle. Number 1, start with the agenda. Remember now, who's behind all this evolutionism? It's Satan, folks. He's trying to destroy God's perfect and good creation. Start with an agenda. Deceive and replace God. That's what he wants. That's the whole purpose of evolutionism, folks, is to do away with the Creator God. You know how important that was? Because once you do away with the Creator God, and that's what evolution is, folks, then it opens the door to the entire woke agenda. And because the church did not address evolutionism, we're now bombarded with the woke agenda. So step 1, start with an agenda. Step 2, question truth. Plant doubt about questioning so-called science. In other words, they equated evolutionism to science right off the bat, and people fell for it, even though it had never been observed. Step 3, misrepresent truth. Give a half-truth. God could have used evolutionism. See how well he did that? God could have used evolution. Now he's captured the minds of most of the people in church. You can have your Bible, you can have your religion book, and you can have evolution too. And they don't realize, most of the people in church, that just destroyed the first 3 chapters of the Bible, which is the reason the whole rest of the Bible had to take place. It's the whole foundation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. You see how important this is? Then step 4, control what people hear. It's called the education system, the media, and social media. Gain control of the public education system, especially the teacher colleges, and they will train the next generation of teachers to believe evolutionism, and also start infiltrating the seminaries, Christian universities, and churches. And finally, provide more solutions. Well, day-age theory. You know, each one of those days of creation could have been millions of years. Or maybe there's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, or progressive creation. Provide all these other solutions so it's easier for people in church to accept millions of years in evolutionism. I hear people say, well, I don't believe in evolution, but I believe in billions of years. Folks, billions of years is the holy grail of evolution. Without billions of years, you cannot have evolution. And billions of years is not a biblical construct at all. You will not find it anywhere in the Bible. But you know, in 3 places in the Bible, it specifically says God created in 6 days. Genesis 1, Exodus 20, verse 11, the 10 Commandments. Incidentally, the 10 Commandments is the only place in the whole Bible that God wrote down himself. Everywhere else he used human agents, but God wrote this down himself. Exodus 20, verse 4, for in 6 days the Lord made the heaven, the earth, and sea, and all that's in them. Exodus 20. God wrote down 6 days. Then in Exodus 31:17, he said again, 6 days. How many times does God have to say something before we believe it? He said 6 days, and I believe it, folks. So that was the selling of evolution. Provide alternative ways to interpret God's word, and many churches fell for it. And then one more thing on tactics. A good way to respond to a challenge, as we've heard, is by asking a question. 3 critical thinking questions. This side over here, it's your turn. Under fear of a penalty, has it ever been observed? Good, see, it comes out. Are you making any assumptions? And how do you know it's true? And what were the 2 key words in the power question? Observable evidence, and the other word was faith. Good, good. Now I'm going to give you some 3 types of questions. I'm going to break them down. Those are like specific questions there. How do you know it's true? Has it ever been observed? Then there's what we call clarification questions. I'll give you an easy one here. What do you mean by? When somebody makes a statement, I've learned, ask them, what do you mean by? You know what? A lot of these people don't have a clue what they just said. They've just heard somebody else tell them this, and they can't explain it. Before you give your information, ask questions, and you'll find out you don't have to give any information because they can't even defend their own statement. That's what Jesus did. That's what Paul did. Then ask logical consequences questions here. If this is true, that might lead to this. In other words, if we allow men to compete in women's sports, what's the conclusion? Women will no longer have their own sports. They will no longer get scholarships in colleges. See, that's how that works. If you have this is where it's going to lead to. And there'll be no more women's professional sports where they get paid. Matthew 24, verse 4 reads this way. Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you." You also see that in Mark and Luke and many other places in Scripture. And one is Colossians 2:8. We read this in Colossians 2:8. This is very important, folks. Deception is extremely important. It's happening, and it's going to get worse, Jesus said, in the end times. And in Colossians 2:8 says this, "See to it that there's no one who takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, in accordance with human tradition, in accordance with the elementary principles of the world, rather than in accordance with Christ." Do not be deceived. Don't be so quick to answer other person's questions. Give you an example. I was at a secular university, did a creation talk. You know how well that probably went over for the audience. The professors were all sitting up front, just being arrogant during my whole talk. When I finished, the audience started asking questions. That's what they want to do in secular universities. They want to destroy you and everything you just said. So they're asking questions, and I can answer most all their questions. And always my tactic is I'll answer the questions, and I give them a question, and they don't like that because they can't answer my questions. Well, a professor stood up right in the front. He said, "Well, Mike, you didn't talk about the radiometric dating methods. Why don't you talk about those?" And he sat back down and smiled at me. I said, "Sir, I'll talk all about those radiometric dating methods. Outside they date rocks and fossils and things. I'll talk all about those radiometric dating methods if you will turn to the audience and tell them about the assumptions involved." And he sat back down and didn't say another word, because he knew if he would have given the assumptions, nobody would have believed in radiometric dating anymore. It would have destroyed everything he taught about evolutionism. See, that's how it was. I never had to answer the question. And he was too embarrassed to challenge me anymore. Learn to study who Jesus is and how he answered and thought. It's very valuable. Now, guess what? We're at that time that if I get the right answer, we will be allowed to take a break. You don't get free breaks here. This is Sunday school, folks. Anybody remember your homework assignment? You've got to repurpose yourself into something. Now, I want to be careful about it. Doesn't mean, men, you put on dresses. Stay away from that. What were the three critical thinking questions? Has it ever been observed? And make any assumptions? How do you know it's true? And the two key words in the power question? One was faith, and was it observable? You passed the quiz. You now have a break. Thank you very, very much.